Over to Reba for your drosha. Thank you very much.
Well, you got caught as well this week. You know, this is really so complicated this time because there are so many different morals and stories in these two short chapters. And so going through all of them, two struck me as very important to our lives and to what is happening today. And it's what I read to you in the first one, Matot. And it referred to the two tribes who went against Moses and against God. They didn't want to go to the land of Israel. They saw better land on their side of the Jordan. So I'd like to share some ideas of great rabbis who've looked at this, and particularly the ideas of the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichronom Livracha. I listened to a Zoom webinar about 2-3 weeks ago to find out that several times that this great man was censured for his liberal ideas. So we have a very peculiar religion. Anyway, everyone argues with everyone. But basically, he and other rabbis have noted that this is of an incredible consequence, because I'm going to just quickly reread to you what I wrote. And because Reuben and Gad, two of the tribes, as you heard, had large herds and cattle. And they didn't want to go with the rest of the people to Israel. Now, as you heard, Moses was very angry. He thought they're going to be punished again. They'll never get to the land. And then it was quite extraordinary that Reuben and Gad said the following thing to Moses. They actually negotiated with Moses and Hashem, which shows you that one can do that. And so they approached Moses for permission to stay there rather than take up their share in the land of Israel. And he was furious. But then they were very, very clever. They said, if we have found favor in your eyes, let this land be given to us. However, we, as you heard me say, we the men will cross with you into the land of the promised land. We will fight and make sure that you have conquered the land, that you've got your land, and that everyone is safe before we return to the other side of the Jordan. And Moses, as you know, got a fright. And he said, what happens if your fellow Israelites see what you're doing and decide also not to go, and we're going to destroy Hashem's plan? Moses thought the proposal was a disaster. But once Reuben and Gad spoke to Moses and negotiated with him, even after Moses had warned them and reminded them of the spies, they were still determined, but they negotiated. And this is very important, particularly to us in progressive Reform Judaism, that we understand we have to look deeper into what has happened in the Torah, merely than blindly follow laws. So, Moses had been blunt with them and honest and confrontational. Again, this is an incident of a completely out of character for Moses. Moses, we know, had a temper. He smashed the tablets initially with a golden calf, but he was a very humble man, and he didn't like confrontations. And yet Moses told them bluntly, when they first proposed it, what would happen to them, that they were going to be the cause of the destruction of the Jewish people. This rang a bell with me because we have voices in the state of Israel today telling this new unity government with our wonderful Rabbi Gilad Karif there, a progressive Jew, a government based on progressive, liberal, inclusive ideas. We have the extreme right wing telling them they're destroying Israel. They're going to ruin it. We're going to lose the land. They'll be responsible for the destruction. And this rang with me, and Moses was blunt and honest and confrontational. But when Reuben and Gad negotiated with Moses and explained that all the men of both their tribes would go with the rest of the tribes of Israel, and they would fight every single bit of the way to make sure that they got the promised land, and only their wives and children would stay behind, and they would only come back once the promised land was the possession of the nation. Moses then starts to think, and guess what? He agrees. Isn't this an incredible lesson in leadership? So this is teaching us that we can negotiate. Moses recognizes the fact that these people have met his objections. It wasn't my way or your way or the Israelite nation will destroy everything, or God will destroy everything. No, Moses takes the decision himself to negotiate and listen. When they dealt with his objections, that they to the last man would fight with the men and cross over with them, and they wouldn't come back unless the land was secure, Moses listened. He didn't shut his ears and say, I'm casting you out, you're killing us. He listened to them. And I thought that was, in fact, outstanding. He extracts from them an agreement to a tenai, this is how they spell it in phonetic Hebrew, Tenaikaful, tenai kaful, a double condition. In other words, in our incredible heritage of Judaism and our Torah, look at what this is telling us. Here they agree to this double condition that maybe has positive and negative in it. By the way, that is what Tanai Kafur means. It means a double condition. It's got a positive and a negative. The positive is they're going to go and secure the land. The negative is they're going to then come back and leave them. But if we do this, there will be consequences. And if we do that, there will be consequences. So what this is telling us is it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We can negotiate. We can find a middle path. And so the two tribes agreed. It was their conditions that Moses actually went against what he'd been told by Hashem to think, what is the best for the Jewish people? These people are determined. They've offered me something which will ensure my girl and Hashem, and at the same time help them. Why should we not agree to that? I find this extraordinary. The Reubenites and the Gadites achieve what they want, but the interests of the other tribes and the nations as a whole have been secured. It's a master class in the art of negotiation. And so I find that extraordinary. Baruch Hashem, Alavai. May this resolution of conflict, both in Israel and Baruch Hashem, a future nation of Palestine, Israel and Palestine, and may this ability to stand back and look for what's good, not only in yourself and for yourself, but for the other, to compromise, to negotiate. May this also take place in all the areas of the world, many on our doorsteps in Africa, where conflict merely results in no negotiation, a firm resolve never to retreat, and many, many deaths. This is not the Jewish way. And this great example here with Moses, the greatest prophet and leader that Hashem has given us, and the world, the three Abrahamic religions, may that prevail. And I would just like to conclude now by looking at the last parashat, Massei, we spoke of. And just to say that those 42 journeys, those 42 places, it's a Midrash explains that perhaps it's like our own lives. And those 42 stages are many different places we've gone in our lives from birth to one day when we pass on. And whether we've made mistakes, whether we've sinned, whether we've made good choices, all the good we've done, everything was a step along the way that Hashem has opened for us to help us find our true potential, to help us find the peace and the contentment that we've lived a life of value. I think you all know that incredible story of two rabbis. It's been passed down for many, many generations now. And they were discussing amongst themselves, and they said, what are we going to do when we meet Hashem one day? And Hashem will say to us, but why haven't you been like Moses? Why haven't you been as great as Moses? And another rabbi was listening to them, and he said, my dear rabbis, my dear friends, you've got it wrong. The only thing that Hashem will ask, and that you must ask yourself, is, why haven't I been as great as the potential that Hashem has put in me and has given me? So I'm going to conclude on that and just say, when we look at our life's journey from birth until now, I know that I'm very grateful that we are together at this point, that we can look back and see what has brought us to this point, that we can understand the mistakes we made and were the way we were thinking, the way we were socialized, the way we didn't understand, but we can forgive ourselves. And most of all, the most important thing is to remember all those little points along your life where you said a kind word to a beggar, where you helped a family member in need, where you reached out to someone who was in pain, and where you did what God commanded us to do. Shabbat Shalom.